Hey everyone, welcome back to another game analysis recap of my chess tournament in Spain. This is the analysis of game 7 out of 9. After yesterday's disappointing result, I am paired against a 2200 from Ireland named Adam Collins. I had the white pieces, let's get it started. I prepared all night against my opponent, who has a very clear set of how he plays. So I started off with e4, c5, knight f3, d6, and pretty much for the next 12 moves, this was all planned out by me. I played d4, takes. This is only what he plays in the recent years. Knight f6, I go knight c3, defending my e4 pawn, knight c6, and now usually I go for bishop e3. In the theory books or in chess.com, that's all I do. And my opponent really just prepared against bishop e3 or f3 here, and I just completely surprised him. And he told me after the game he had no clue I was gonna go for bishop g5. Bishop g5 is a little bit more aggressive approach. You're developing your bishop kind of higher up the board and attacking one of the defensive pieces of the king in the future positions. And you'll see how this bishop becomes very ravenous later on in the game. e6 is played, he plays this. I mean, this is what I prepared against. So all of this is pretty much prep. I castle, I get my king to safety, we trade on d4. A prophylactic queen d2 is what I prepared. But this is fine. My opponent played a game very similar to this in round like 2 or 3. So a lot of that game was into my preparation when looking at this game. And of course, I have a theory book and I have a top engine to help me accompany me to prepare this game. b5 is played, I go g4. Again, still home prep, we're on move 13 and I'm all prepared. g4 is usually to go bishop e3 and then go g5 to attack this knight on tempo and then greater push your pawns because the kings will be opposite side castled here on the board. So my opponent goes b4, I go knight e2, and now my opponent has two choices. Adam could go h6, kicking my bishop, but now my bishop could go back to e3, and this is what we call in chess a hook, because now after h4, g5, you have to respond with either takes or I will take you on h6. And so this is a big weakness for the black pieces. So my opponent just goes a5 and continues with his absolute pawn rush on my king. Meanwhile, the black king is not castled and it's move 14 on the board, pretty rare in my OTB games. So I went with knight g3, which was a complete surprise to him. That means that you prepared well against your opponent. That's a big achievement in the opening. We are 15 moves in and my opponent now takes a 10-minute move. Thinks about what is going on and says to me after the game, knight g3, I really liked it. I've never played against it, but it is very logical. Because here, let's say you castle, now I can go knight h5 and pressure this knight, and if you take my knight, that's a complete blunder to bishop takes e7, and now you have a double attack on two pieces. If you move your rook, I can take on d6, attack the queen, another double attack, and I win a piece. Now if you play h6, I can just play bishop f4, attack this d6 pawn, and after e5 is played, I go bishop e3, and now I have this super nice square on f5 to invade on d6, or I can even go knight h5, or we've created a hook on h6 once again. So h4 and g5 is a really nice plan, and this knight can't take refuge on h5 because of my knight on g3. But anyways, knight g3 is tried and my opponent goes rook c8. After 10 minutes, my opponent goes rook c8. And here I'm completely confused because what I want to do, which is bishop takes, knight h5, at the time, I thought this bishop can now defend this pawn and just move away instead of just staying there and I'll just like completely cripple the black pieces as kingside. So I thought just bishop d4 now that the rook is on c8 and I cannot take on d4 because of queen takes c2 and there's checkmate that follows. But there's a tactic here for white I completely missed. I think we saw it in analysis, but it's bishop a6. And here I'm attacking the rook on rook a8, attacking my bishop, and now I'm attacking your bishop. You have one weakness more than I. Queen takes d4, rook takes a6, and now I can take on g7, and bad things are coming your way. Rook f8, knight f6 check, king e7 to hold on to the rook, and now knight takes h7, attacking this rook. We're already up 2 pawns. king is in the center, it's completely over. All to say, this variation would have worked, but that's not all. I have like 2 other moves that are very good. There's also bishop f4 attacking d6, and after e5 is played, I have bishop e3 here. And if you go like, let's say castles and it's all swell, now we go g5, knight e8, and now h4, and we're attacking speed lightning. But the best move, and by far the most creative move, and very instructional as well, that I missed here, is the beautiful bishop a6 that hinders exactly the bad move that rook c8 is. Rook c8 now has to move back to a8 to take up and attack my bishop, and now not many things are free in life, but a free bishop move is exactly the case in this position. I go bishop e2, the position has not changed, it's still black to play, but I have a free bishop move on e2, connect my rooks, and it's still black to play. After a 5 to 10 minute turn myself, I don't go bishop f4, I don't go bishop takes f6, and I don't go bishop a6, all really good moves. Instead, I go for bishop e3, which is now a mistake because now I'm threatening g5, but my knight is on g3. So when my opponent plays bishop c6, which he found, it's an exceptional move, I don't know why it's inaccurate, and I go g5, my opponent has a perfect response of knight d7, and not knight h5, obviously it's covered, and now my knight is not on e2 to go to d4 as we saw earlier. So my knight is left here on g3, and kind of like, what do we do now? And now my small strategical advantage is blown. This is any man's game. Here I really have 2 move options. Either I could go g5 and directly kick the knight to d7, or I could go h4 and just patiently go g5 eventually and kick the knight then. So I say to myself, why don't I just wait instead of playing g5? If I play h4, I can play g5 anyways at any time. Well, this is a bad move. It's a bad move order. You want to play the most forcing move first and then go on with h4. I think I was scared of g5, knight back to d7, h4, and then maybe g6 blockading my whole thing, but it's nonsense because I get h5. So I don't know why I just played a patient, inaccurate h4 when g5 is clearly the better move, and now black gets to counterattack in the center. Adam goes d5, which is a really interesting move. d5, I had always seen that I have this little trick up my sleeve. I can go this really nice, beautiful e5. And I played it super fast because it's tricky. If you take this pawn with your queen, I have bishop f4 and your queen is absolutely trapped, I win the game. So I played e5 extremely fast where there's just knight d7 here. And I saw knight d7, I was really excited to play my next move f4 because now I'm coming in with f5 and I'm attacking the king in the center. It's extremely exciting. My hand goes above the pawn, I'm about to touch the f pawn, and then I see there's a tactic against me. f4, there is d4 here. And because I played f4, the bishop slices through my position and attacks my rook, and there's a double discovered attack here. And so I think, because if I don't play f4, I am completely losing my e5 pawn. Would you have given a pawn here for free, or played f4 and sacrificed the exchange for a pawn in a form of compensation? The correct answer is none of the above. After the game, I looked at the engine, and the engine told me I was still completely fine and I really didn't have to lose a pawn. In fact, I can sacrifice this pawn and just win it back later with this crazy line. Knight h5, attacking g7, castles to defend that pawn, bishop d4 to try to defend this, and threaten f4 to defend it completely. Knight takes, it has to be taken now, otherwise f4. Then I go queen e3 attacking this knight. You can defend this knight or move it. If you move the knight, it's a bad option because g7 falls and thank you very much for the pawn back. If you defend it either with f6 or bishop d6 or bishop f6, if you play f6, I have bishop a6, rook moves, let's say rook a8, and now f4. If rook takes, I take back the knight. I'm still down a pawn, but after f takes, bishop d6, I can take on g7. And if you move your queen, I can take on g7. And if you play d4 here, which is the only good move, now I have queen g3 still attacking your queen. The queen moves, attacking my rook a second time. Rook hf1, and here the eval gives equal. I mean, how crazy is that? That's still giving back the pawn, but activating your pieces against that pawn grab is still an equal position. Absolutely mind-blowing. So if you know me and my positional style, hi, I'm Zach, the chess nerd. I like to play very aggressive chess. And so I went with f4 here, which is a blunder, says the engine, but really, I know it's giving material, you know? I'm like aware that it's giving material. So anyways, I calculated this for like 10 minutes, so I'm pretty proud of what I've mustered up, even though I'm not loving what I'm seeing 5-10 moves down the road. So d4 is played here, the only move that wins material, with this striking double attack on my bishop and rook. I take the pawn and then sack the exchange. I have given the exchange for one pawn and one bishop. So I have the bishop pair, which is a pretty good advantage in chess. The king is still in the center. I have a pawn storm against the king if you want a castle one day. And I'm pretty okay here. So you're opening the H file for me in the event of you castling, which is already positive for me. And I think I had G5 here trapping the bishop for later purposes. Castles was played instead. I go knight G3, all about activating my pieces now and getting them back into the attack. Rook fd8, bringing a rook on this file, and now my pieces become very shy. You see, moves like bishop c5 aim to trade my bishop pair and to activate a knight and to attack my queen. It's just a lot of overload on my pieces, and my heavy pieces are very scared of these minor and heavy pieces attacking those superior to them. So I go bishop a6. Finally, I see this idea. Took enough time, Zach. Rook a8, I go back to d3 to axe my bishop on this h7 square. Bishop c5 finally now done. So this is less scary now because I'm also closing the file up against my queen. So if I ever choose to take this bishop, the knight takes and there's less of a trade of rooks or a discovered attack on my queen, which is really the fear here in the position. So I go with c3. So I played c3 with the aim of if you take my bishop, I take back and I semi-close the file for the time being, and I would like to sack a pawn so that it closes the file on you, probably. And then I would go like f4, f5, f6. But my opponent took on c3, I took on c3, and now bishop b4, just aiming to trade my bishops, and then my king is loose. It's exposed, it's in the center of black's open lines. We don't like that. So I go with takes, which is a bad move. I should have gone with like rook c1 or something extremely passive, assuming my disadvantage, or even knight e4. Wow, knight e4 works? Knight c5, yeah? Knight d6, but I saw knight d3. Oh, this is good enough. It's good enough. Rook a b8, oh my goodness, knight e4. Knight e4 with less of a disadvantage. That's wild. On knight c5, I meet it with knight d6. I completely missed that. That's crazy. So I went with takes, which is a really bad move because it opens up the A file up against me. Yes, the B file is closed, but this A file is somehow more dangerous with this queen coming in, and I did not think for my opponent in these next moves. I went with knight e4 immediately. So I still had the same idea. I wanted to plaster my knight on d6, get a striving knight on d6. I told myself, if I get my knight on d6 on the third rank of the black pieces, that is like heaven for my knight and heaven for my position, because my knight can control a lot of these files that these rooks want to enter from. So a knight on d6 is king. You want a knight on d6. But I missed queen a5. I only looked at queen a7 here, of which I can just play bishop c4 and I'm completely fine. No discovered attack is that good because I have checkmate in 2 moves. But here, queen a5 is similar but completely different. Queen a5 defends this rook a second time. So that now, if I play bishop c4 and defend a2, which is being threatened by the queen move, there's just knight takes e5, and the rook is being defended twice. I can't take back this knight. My queen falls. and I can't take here, my queen falls, so this would be a mess, and I have to come up with a defense on a2. And it's sobering because not a lot of options are good here. So I go with a3, and my opponent takes, and now I go with b4. The engine still wants me to go with a queen trade and go into this losing endgame, but I went with b4 here, attacking this queen. And now rook b8 attacks my pawn and pins my pawn. I had seen this coming. I go with b5, and my opponent is quite surprised here, actually goes with queen a4, and after king a2 I find some stability because it's hard here to progress as black. How are you going to checkmate my king? Knight b6 is played. I finally get my knight on d6. I'm so happy about it, covering this rook, covering a lot of the space. Knight d5 here. Okay, knight d5 threatens knight b4 things. It threatens some spooky stuff. So I aim to block a lot of these new threats. So like knight b4 with the queen coming in. So instead, I try to go with bishop c4. And it's a bad move for a lot of reasons. Let me just tell you. First of all, on knight b4, yes, I go king a1. No queen b3, that's what the move is used for, but my opponent doesn't have to go knight b4. You can just sacrifice your rook on d6, and after takes, you just take on c4, and it's completely winning. Like, you're up a piece, my king's about to be mated, it's done. But not only that, in this position, my opponent finds a brilliant move. And at that, it's a queen sacrifice on me. This is the first time I've been queen sacrificed in my OTB journey. It's tough times, but you suck it up. It is what it is. Queen takes d1. And it forced immediate resignation by me. It was a tough moment to take in because I just came off 0 defeats, and now I just got 2 losses in a row in this tournament. I still have a pretty good tournament, standing at 4 out of 7. Oh, it's getting less good, chat. It's getting less good. But after queen takes d1, it attracts my queen to take on d1. Of course, you took a rook in that doing, and now you have knight c3, forking my king and queen. My king has to move, and then you take my queen, and you're up a full rook. There's no way in the history of this universe that the white pieces can win this game, and in this position, no. In this position, I resigned. Congratulations to my opponent. Tomorrow, I'm playing a 1700. I was on board 15 not 2 games ago, and these 2 defeats have cost me so much. I'm playing a 1700 on board 42. See you tomorrow for a must-win game.